Uncle Fried. Welcome to the virtual Mkuku.
Thanks, brother. Thanks for having me.
Why do people call you Uncle Fried? Mina ngikwazi Kagiso Sebediela.
I don't know. When I moved into Res, 2008, we got names, as is sort of Afrikaans Res culture.
Yeah.
And my name was Freedom, and the other guy's name was Long Walk.
Long walk.
Yeah. So the whole thing was Long Walk to Freedom. And I'm lucky, of course, that I got the freedom part because it wouldn't have worked out otherwise.
Today we'd be calling you Uncle Long Walk.
I think we would have gotten that, would have squashed it quite early.
Freedom, I'm very honored to know you, to have worked beside you, and to have watched what you've been building in a career. I think just to start off, where are you from? What do you currently do? And then maybe we can then unpack your journey.
Sure. So I was born in Diepkloof, Zone 3, in a small little clinic. I think it's closed now, actually. I drove past it the other day. I lived most of my younger years, so developmental, so 0 to about 5 odd years. I stayed in Diepkloof, and then we periodically moved across Soweto. And then I stayed in Spruitview actually for a bit as well. Stayed in a bit of Hillbrow for a couple of years while I studied in Lyndhurst. And I went to varsity at the University of Johannesburg from what was Metropolitan Raukol, or Raukol at the time, a school that was a feeder into UJ. And I think that was, one of the biggest and most greatest things that ever happened is for me to go to UJ. I think it's been a really fantastic university to have been at, but because of the sort of human capital that I now sort of have, and the range of individuals that I met who are now doing some really great work out there as well. From a work perspective, I'm a chef, I guess, but I do a lot more admin nowadays. I run Freedom's Kitchen, or Saucepan Holdings actually, which is, I guess, a group of businesses that are food related, so a food solutions company. We do a range of stuff, so from corporate catering, we do cooking classes, we do educational pieces now for schools, so we're teaching young people how to cook. We provide private services, but the main and the core is catering, and it has always been the business that made the most sense and the most money. I ran a restaurant for 2 years, Mangrove, which is now closed, unfortunately. Actually sat in a legal conversation yesterday with the landlord and the lawyers, and we owe them quite a bit of money.
Jeez.
Yeah, upwards of R1 million. So we'll see how that goes. But that's what I do.
We'll definitely get into that. Thank you. You've lived in some of the Lanier parts of townships, Diepkloof, Spruitview. Some people don't know how decent those neighborhoods are, because we always think, it's a mess. You're a chef now. You studied culinary arts at UJ?
No. So I studied biochemistry and psychology. And my cooking journey obviously starts when I was quite young. So I was the guy who sat in the kitchen with my mom instead of sort of playing soccer outside with the boys. And I enjoyed licking the pot of custard after she had made it, but was more interested in how it was made. Over time, started experimenting with a couple of things. When I got to UJ, I liked science, and I think I was pushed into it throughout my primary high school career. And so biochemistry was a natural fit. I had the grades for it. And I did a bit of psychology because that was nice. There were really nice girls in psychology. It was
nice girls.
Yeah. There's a nice place to relax after like a heavy, biology class or chemistry class.
Yeah.
And I did exceptionally well in that class. It was really amazing. I failed my first year, which was, I think, an eye-opener, but also gave me an opportunity to actually reassess how I wanted to experience university. So I did my course over 5 years, and that allowed me to have a lot of free time to figure out what I wanted to do and who I was and what I liked. And so I cooked. I cooked for my mates on campus. We stayed in a 6-man res house, and it became a popular thing. You've eaten with us.
Definitely.
We've had a couple of meals together. And I guess when it became so much more of a volume thing that I was spending a lot of money on feeding my friends, which I didn't mind, but I thought maybe we could turn this into something. I think the thing that crossed me into that space was when someone tweeted me, how do I cook the steak? And I thought, I'm not going to do this because I've been getting these questions. So now I'm going to sell you the stuff because I know you're also bored of eating chips and bread on a Sunday. Everybody misses a home-cooked meal. Yeah, everybody misses a home-cooked meal. So I figured, let me offer that. So we went on to Twitter with Zamani at the time, buff guy. So he did our deliveries without a top on, which was a really, experiential thing for the ladies. They enjoyed that. Our first order was about 80 plates of food. We were cooking off a 2-plate stove.
This is still at varsity?
At UJ, yeah.
Hectic.
So on the Wednesday, we go out on Twitter. We're like, okay, this plate is going to be $27. I think it was a bolognese or something like that. And we got 80 orders within the campus space. So, it's a 2-plate stove with a little oven. I didn't know the matrix at the time, what that looks like, how it can be done, or if it's possible to be done. So we went shopping on a Saturday, came back, peeled pretty much the whole night of Saturday, woke up very early Sunday, and we worked literally from 6 till like 9 to finish all those 80 orders. And of course, there were frustrations and all sorts of other things. But the beautiful thing we had done was we had created something. People were really receptive of it. We put in a lollipop and, drew a smile on the serviette.
That's
very cute stuff that people tweeted back, and it created a bit of a momentum, So every Sunday we started doing this. At the time, I was still behavioral therapist doing one-on-one stuff with autistic kids. So that year was quite heavy in terms of school, the work, and starting this business. It then evolved into a Shisa Nyama. We the one Sunday we're like, actually, instead of us coming to you, come to us. We fortunately had a big lawn in front of our 6-man house, and we were joined by 200 people. And campus security kicked us out because they were like, what the hell? This is not your mother's house. It became that. People brought, speakers, and, it was a really big, good time. So we had to move that concept out of the gates of UJ. And that became what was known as the Shisa Nyama Mobile.
You are running a business on campus while you're a student. Was UJ aware of this? Did they condone this, or you guys doing it underground? Because I know a lot of universities don't allow students to run businesses.
I think at the time we didn't care. Nor were we could plead ignorance. No one ever came to us and said what you're doing is wrong, or it's not allowed. I think at some point deep in it, somebody raised something, but we never took it quite seriously. Yeah. Our res respected what we were doing. It was a service that people really enjoyed, so nobody told on us, I think that opened up gates for other stuff at UJ, actually. So we became recognized as a service provider of sorts, which was great, because then it meant we could maybe look at a shop in the school, etc. But yeah, it wasn't, in our heads, it wasn't taboo. We were doing people a service, and that's how things work, right? We do something for people, they pay us, and that's really how it goes.
Do you believe the reason they shut down your Shisa Nyama on campus was because of the noise, or because they just didn't want you to
I think
run
it was a noise thing, and, population management. You can't have 200 students drinking on a Sunday, playing music till quite late.
Yeah.
We lived next to a res for postgrads, so obviously they're studying and they're trying to get their honors or whatever the case is. So we were making quite a bit of a ruckus. I don't think they didn't want us to enterprise. It was more about controlling the environment and respecting everybody else who's there to do other stuff and not run a business.
2 quick questions. The first one being, you said you preferred being in the kitchen with your mom than playing soccer with the boys outside. Was your father happy with that dynamic of you not wanting to play outside and being with your mom?
I mean, he would have been lucky enough to comment on that if he was around. So I was largely raised by my mom, particularly in those early years. My dad, in those sort of years of my life, was pretty absent. He came in like little spats, and a lot of it was filled with disappointment even. So I don't think I ever thought about what he would think.
Okay.
That stuff wasn't important to me. And I think I've always been very clear about doing me and forgetting how everybody else feels about it, because it's my life at the end of the day. And so I don't want to have regrets about if I could have, or, what if. So I generally do the things that I like, and whether they work out or not is a different story. But coming back to him, I don't know. He's never been to the restaurant. It's closed today, and he's never been. So for me, I think his opinion matters a little less than most.
Yeah. Second question is, you said you were doing behavioral therapy while you were studying.
Yeah.
What's that about?
So the lady I was dating at the time was doing psychology, full scale. And the one day, these ladies came to Res and they announced on the intercom that they are coming from a school for kids with on the spectrum. And it was if you were doing psychology, you could come and see them and speak to them. So we went down, the both of us, and, we spoke to these ladies and we found that to be a little bit interesting. So we're like, we'll come through and see what it's about. Had an interview in Norwood at the school. I loved it. I love kids. I've always loved kids. So it became quite easy for me to get into that space. I trained with them to become ABC therapist, which is a form of intervention. The style in which you teach, all right, that concentrates on particular elements, because these kids have deficiencies and they've got some really great things about them. So depending on where they are on the spectrum. So I did that for 2 years, and it was quite an intense job, because emotionally, you get quite attached, but also when you see progress, when you don't see progress. And also the kids, man, like, they struggle with a lot of stuff. But when you do cross over to a kid being able to tie his shoelaces completely, because you start from putting it through one hole at the bottom, and you do that almost 20 times until he gets that that's where you start. And then you have to move on to the next hole. And so that whole sequence takes about 4 or 5 weeks, right? Because that's all you're focusing on in that session. For 30 minutes, you're literally trying to figure and teach them how to do that. And it gets even more complex, where you must make bunny ears, because it's a fine motor skill. It's a following of instructions. So it was heavy, like most days you came back from work and you were like, yeah, it's been a long day. And one of the bigger challenges I had was one of the kids I was assigned, I went to school with him. He was a grade 3 kid, and I sat with him in class. So it felt like I was a TA, because all the other students or kids were asking.
When you say you went to school with them, you accompanied him?
Physically went
school.
to school, sat through class with him, because he didn't understand intentions. And so you think, what is that? But if someone bumped into him, he wouldn't understand that could have been a mistake. And so his response would be quite violent. So I needed to intervene at the moment after it happened to teach him in that moment that was not intentional. It was a mistake. And so again, that's 4 or 5 weeks of we're playing in the playground. It's soccer. People are going to bump into you. Can you discern whether this was intent or whether it was a mistake? And to an atypical kid, that's like a no-brainer.
To a?
A typical kid.
Atypical.
Atypical kid.
These were kids with autism?
Yeah. And autism, Asperger's. There's a number of genetic issues. But yeah, autism being one of the most prominent, I think, that everybody knows about.
I'm just fascinated by this aspect you're raising of intention and how many adults react to situations in the wrong way. And I wonder how many undiagnosed adults they are, that they may not necessarily have autism, but they may have some type of...
Absolutely.
Hectic. Were you getting paid?
Yeah.
Did you use this money for your business?
I did. Mostly, yeah. I lived a fairly comfortable life, I think, in varsity. I had to pay for my school fees as well. Of course, I got NSFAS as well. but I did fairly well in school, so I was able to get that converted into a grant. I still owe them money though, so I need to pay them back.
Pay back the money.
They stay calling me, and I'm running a loss-making business.
Yeah.
You need to understand. So yeah, I was getting paid, and they were charging fairly well about 10 years ago. But I found out later that they weren't really fair in how they were doing things, not very transparent. And before I left, one of the parents approached me and said, "Would you want to do this outside of this environment? Particularly for this kid I was going to school with." And when she mentioned the numbers, I was like, "Geez, okay,
that's crazy.
Sounds good." But unfortunately, I had made my decision to go to culinary school after finishing my degree.
You guys get kicked off campus, and then you set up something off campus.
Yeah.
How does that journey look?
I walk away. Literally, at the back of UJ was a gate that came out into, what's that area at the back? West Dean.
Yeah.
In West Dean, there was a place called Tipsy Gypsy. Tipsy Gypsy was a hippie kind of space, very weird, lots of colors, whites and their things. But we approached them and we said, "We've got a concept. We want to do it here in your backyard." And they were like, "Cool, sounds fine." We were pretty dumb at the time, didn't understand the whole value chain. So we accepted some really crazy things. They took the bar. I think there was a bit of a split as well on the tickets, right? We charged like $50 and you got these massive steaks and like a huge plate of food. It just didn't make sense.
In retrospect?
In retrospect, of
okay.
course. The event itself and the euphoria of having created this thing and people coming, because we had grown it to a point where alumni had heard about it. Of course, we're connected on the socials, had heard about it and wanted to come and experience this thing. What was going on a Sunday that, people really spoke about all the time. So we had 400 people come through Tipsy Gypsy, very tight venue.
On a Sunday?
On a Sunday.
That's a lot.
School day, right?
And you're still a student?
Still a student.
Oh, snap.
And those numbers, of course, when you look at them, you're like, yeah, you know what? We're doing something great. But there were 3 of us, and I think Zamani's brother, there must have been 2 other waiters that were helping us out. But it was a shit show, for lack of a better word. We bribed until our hands came off, essentially. But everybody had a great time, It was a fantastic day. Lots of great pictures and memories from that. And that grew to, substantial numbers over the couple of months that we did it, until we sort of called it a day, And that was particularly because we're now splitting as a group and we're not seeing things differently. And I was more interested in the food element anyway. And so we needed to make that decision. And we did. And it's something I want to bring back now that I have a bit more capacity. And I'm looking forward to what it would look like now.
These Sundays were called, did they have a name? Was it just
Shisa Nyama Mobile.
Shisa Nyama Mobile.
Yeah. The idea was to move it around town. So we were quite grand in our ideas because we thought we could take this thing to Grahamstown. We loved going to Grahamstown for the Arts Fest, so we thought we could take it there and I'm sure it will be a hit.
Yeah.
And we took it to city center at some point, to the Mills in Johannesburg, which is a sort of rooftop venue. Really cool stuff. Like, I think we were pioneering stuff that wasn't done at the time, which became quite popular over the years. So if you think neighbor goods, that's essentially what we're doing. We're offering food, a vibe in very great spaces. And people really enjoyed that stuff. And I think had we sort of held on to that concept and pushed through with it, I think it would be something quite big today.
What do you think caused the split? A lot of people, it's like a band. A lot of people split very early because of different visions. Or were there other reasons?
No. It's purely a vision issue. I think Zamani in this case it still is very driven by the economics of business. Okay. That wasn't always my viewpoint, and I think you'll know this. Money has never been the thing that made me do the things I'm doing. But when you grow up and when you understand the economics of life in general, you begin to appreciate the need for a business to make sense and work.
Yeah.
And today I'm a very different person because of that. I understand the passion, which is key because that's what connects you to people. But it needs to make financial sense because at the end of the day, I have people who I employ. I have my kids now. and I have to make sure that everybody eats.
What happens after you guys split? Because I'm guessing now, at some point you have to graduate and go get a job.
I graduate 2011, 2012. I graduate. My grandmother comes onto the stage, grand pictures, everything is great. People are happy. Then I announce to them that, guys, unfortunately, I'm not going to be a doctor because that's what they believed I was doing. And again, blacks not understanding, not even investigating beyond sort of this sort of frontal, what they can see was for me also a bit of a mind, it messed up with me a bit because my family just have never understood anything really. You try to explain what biochemistry is, it's more of a support function, maybe even for doctors. You're not a doctor. I'm going to open a business.
It was about doctor.
How? What are you doing? Are you going to cook? Are you going to work in a restaurant? What? So I graduate and I decide, okay, cool. I'm going to pursue this business and let me then enjoy my life for the last time for a couple of years. So I go to Cape Town in December. I take what I had saved from the business, what I had gotten from my job, and I go have the greatest time. I meet a 34-year-old who sort of takes me in. When I arrived in Cape Town, I went to a club, I think, and I was waiting for my friend who I was going to stay with to come and get me. And then I met these people, and, the lady is 34, 32, and she says, I like you and I want to spend the time you're here with you. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Let's do it. She gives me her car. She gives me a card for me to spend.
Stranger.
Stranger.
Insane. This is a South African person?
South African person.
Black person?
Black person.
Hectic.
Actually, a prominent journalist. I only found out later. She gave me a book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being. One of the greatest books I've ever read, and I'm not a big reader.
Yeah.
So I go to Cape Town. I have this great time. I take a bus back. I've blown my cash. It's the longest bus ride of my life. I hated it. Sitting next to a guy who kept on opening cans of beer. And, 24 hours in, there's odors and all sorts of other things. And that was unpleasant. And I thought to myself, I'm never going to be on a bus again for that long.
Yeah.
And nor do I want to be on a bus for that long. Yeah. And I think I come back and reality hits. It's Jan. There isn't particularly a lot of catering work. I'm not known to be a caterer. I haven't even decided that's the direction I'm going to take. But I am known as a chef, as a cook, right? Or as a cook. And most people call me a chef because people don't know the difference. And somehow my aunt calls and says, there's an ED opening, so Enterprise Development by Tiger Brands through HTA, which is a culinary school. Go try and see if you can't get in there. They'll pay for the time that you're there. Culinary school, very expensive. I go there, they tell me it's actually full. So I'd have to wait another 6 months. So I'm like, that sucks. Okay, but anyway, I'll continue to do what I'm doing. And a week or two later, I get a call from him. They're like, somebody dropped off. Are you still keen? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I get into that space and it opens me up to the world of food. You meet chefs, you meet people who run the associations, and you meet brands. You get to understand what it takes to run a business. They make you understand that stuff outside of teaching you the food aspects of things. And that, I think, is to date the differentiator and why I became or was able to take my business from where it was to where I guess it is today, if that makes sense.
Geez, that's brilliant. 2 quick questions. The first one being, what is the difference between a cook and a chef? And the second one being, what is a culinary school?
Sure. Typically, a cook is anyone who can get into a kitchen and make a meal.
Okay.
Essentially. A chef is someone who's classically trained in the art of culinary exposure. So, culinary school, you find professional chefs who are trained to teach. And that's where you go to become a chef. So you do a diploma.
A chef is a professional trained cook.
Yes.
That is an artist, is what you're saying?
Essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to go into your Cape Town experience, but I think you were just explaining part of your journey, and we'll speak about it another time. So now that you're here, you realize, I think I want this to be my life for now. At no point are you thinking biochemistry, maybe let me carry on and work as a behavioral therapist?
The behavioral therapy stuff was too intense, and I don't think it's where I saw myself self-expressing the most. You know, you were with a child or 5 for the day, and that was that. I didn't see any sort of growth and becoming bigger or becoming more special or showcasing what skills I had. I think I'm generally great with people, and I thought that would be better used in my trade.
Yeah.
Biochemistry, towards finishing, I figured, nah, this is not who I am. I can't sit in a laboratory dealing with specimens all day either. I need human interaction. That was a big part of why I did all the things I did. I fed the guys because I enjoyed supper at the table, and maybe it's a reflection of sort of my life growing up and not having that stuff and sort of compensating along the way. But it is a big deal for me to spend time and, you know, have human interaction and engage, because in that way you find out a lot more about people. You get to food is a gateway. You know, I think if you go anywhere in the world, everybody will tell you about the place to go, and usually those places to go are food or drink. So I think those things for me spoke to also my love for travel. It spoke to my love for fine, you know, drinks and food, which are things I really enjoy and I like to do. So the culmination for me was I need to get into the space and really sort of push the boundary so that I can get out there, you know.
You spoke about meeting associations at the culinary school. And one of the things I've always been concerned about is almost all industries in this country have some type of mafia or monopoly.
Yeah.
Would you say in the food space there's something similar?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you think about, there's a lot of activity in this country. There's a lot of events. There's there's a huge need for catering services. There are big businesses who are involved in contract catering. And that is to say, a big mine, a big hospital, a big corporate contracts you to come and service their stuff. KPMG, 3,000 people. When you walk through the doors, which I did, ask you if you've got $1 million in your bank account to support this service that you want to deliver, because they'll pay you after 120 days or whatever the case is.
Wow.
That's not a small thing. And that's the difference between a small and a big business. And there's not a lot of people who are sitting with $1 million in their bank account, right? But also what you then get to understand are the economies of scale. I sat in a room with 5, 6 other gentlemen coming and representing these big businesses. We're going in for a contract, and it was a briefing. And in that meeting, they're talking about the sites that they have. And at the time, I was running 5 canteens, and these guys were talking about 52 sites in Joburg. And I was just like, I need to leave because there's nothing that I can do here. Small margins business, you know, the catering, the contract catering stuff. So you needed to have a lot in order to maximize on the numbers and get better prices from suppliers and get better terms with your suppliers. So having a 30-day account, having a 60-day account with your supplier allows you to trade for 60, 90 days without being paid. And you can't get that as a Kagiso who is running a small little spaza shop, you know? And a lot of people don't know this stuff.
Yeah. And
I always, you know, I refer to my business as a food solutions business because I never wanted to be called a caterer because of the association of the name in the township. No one respects the trade in the township. Also, if you look at the service provider themselves, they don't take it seriously. If you go, last night I was at an event and it was Champagne Festival. There were maybe 200 CIB clients, so corporate investment banking. So very high-end catering, right? There were probably 40 dishes that were served. There were 2 times, and just to give you a picture, that food would have cost anywhere between 200 and 300,000, right? It's just one night of food. It probably takes about 2-3 days to prepare that kind of food. 4 days, and you're doing those kinds of numbers. Then you come to Soweto and someone wants you to do their wedding, and they're telling you out the gate, I've got 100 people, which you know is not true because of how blacks are. And I only have a 10,000 rand. And then you're like, but at 100 rand per person, what do you expect? And they've got this long list of a menu, and you're just like, I can't. There's no way you can make money when you're looking at those kind of numbers. So the pricing model that is used in Soweto, which is something I really want to get into at a later stage, is sort of upskilling those businesses in the hood, because I don't know how they're making money. They can't be making money. It doesn't make sense. And that's why those businesses don't grow. That's why, they don't ever get exposed to more, which allows them to scale. Because how the business looks, how the people who are servicing look, the equipment that you're using, the trends that you are introducing, all that stuff is only possible if you're exposed to what great businesses are doing out there in your field. And that exposure is not something that everybody has an opportunity to see.
Oh, hectic. Have you been influenced, like the rest of us, by people like Jamie Oliver, Gordon Ramsay, Anthony Bourdain, Nigella? Would you say they've played an impact in your life?
I didn't know Anthony Bourdain until he died.
Committed suicide, I believe.
Something along those lines. I don't really care much, to be honest. Jamie Oliver has always been in our faces.
Yeah.
I think even if you wanted to ignore, you would have seen him somehow. By virtue of the business I'm in, I would see him a lot more and get exposed to him a lot more. And so is Gordon Ramsay and all these other American chefs and I guess British, whatever. Influence-wise, maybe now, because of how they run their businesses, I think it's really brilliant. If you look at Jamie Oliver and you look at Gordon Ramsay, very different style of chef.
Yeah.
Really, really French, classic, very straight to the point, 3 Michelin stars, really sort of clean and swift. Here you've got a guy, Jamie Oliver, who's really human about the cooking. It's about using your hands, and it's about being dirty, and it's about getting the kids in there. And I like both styles, and I'm trying to sort of merge them in the way that I do my things. So a little bit of influence, I suppose.
Do you have local chefs, cooks that you look up to? I mean, we've seen some of them on some of these shows that have come up now. And how do you feel about the Lorna Masegos, Somizis of this world having cooking shows as opposed to trained chefs that actually understand food at that level?
I think there's a distinct difference between entertainment and what we do.
Yeah.
And not everyone has the ability to entertain and execute.
Yeah.
And I suppose if I'm a Somizi and I see a gap, I'm a cook. That's what the general population will relate with. And so it makes sense for TV. It makes sense for Alona to extract as much value from what she can give. So I don't hold it against him. I think it's wrong to try and teach people the wrong things and experiment with our lives, because that's really what happens. But if you've got a good team that really cares about the product, I think they'll package it properly. So everybody must get their bag. I'm fine with that. But, I think we need to distinguish quite clearly to say, this guy is a cook and he's just literally experimenting and playing around and entertaining us. This guy is doing his thing. He's a chef, and, it's something to sort of look forward to, and you can really learn from that person.
Do you have local influences? I'm also thinking of someone like Siba.
Personally, Siba, no.
She's also entertainment more than...
No, so she's a food stylist.
Okay.
And that's another sort of, aspect of what we do, making things look good, which is very important. People eat with their eyes.
Yeah.
The drama and theater of food has grown over the years. Now when you get served food, there's steam coming out and, things are cracked in front of you. So people love that. There's fire.
It's on fire.
You know what I mean? Fire room and all of that stuff. It's Instagram worthy. And so it's evolved with everything around us. So the tech and whatever. Yeah. But local influence, like I said, I do what I want to do. It's never been about what others are doing. particularly, I never wanted to stifle my thinking and my creativity by trying to be like somebody else.
Yeah.
Recently, though, I think I'm starting to read a little bit more, maybe about local guys and what they're doing. David Higgs' story is a little bit interesting. I read 2 pages of his book, and I found it quite interesting because he starts off talking about the failure of Marble in the first couple of days that they opened. And immediately that captured me because I was going through exactly the same thing. So I think that relativity is important, and for me, it only matters if it's relative to me at that time. Okay. So I don't, to answer your question, I don't really have local influences.
Your business, you said, has closed down and you guys were sitting with lawyers and landlords. Those are some of the darker sides of business. I'm not sure if you're comfortable to share, not specifically that incident, but just maybe some of your failures and what you've learned from running a business that was spurred on by passion.
You make a lot of mistakes we are quite unfortunate as blacks. I think there's a lot of things that we really are missing out on that, I'd say counterparts have. So having a dad or an uncle or a friend's dad or uncle or brother who runs a business and you're able to ask them stuff about it is something that most of us didn't have, still don't have. And to get a mentor is even tougher because you just don't know what you're looking for. You don't know what you want to ask them. It's generally driven by the wrong things. So I think business has taught me a lot of lessons. I mean, you bought me a car at some point.
I bought you a car?
Yeah, you gave me a loan.
Hey,
it's 50 grand, I think, at the time.
You must edit that out. Bought you a car, yeah, Baba.
At the time, I decided I'm not going to get back onto taxis and stuff. I'd reached out. I don't even remember how that all went down. I went to my uncle's friend, and he gave me 6 grand, I think, to start my business or to get going. Very risk-averse guy. I only paid him back maybe a year or 2 ago. And it's not because I never had the money all the time, but just really wasn't top of mind, and he never really just, reminded me. He actually reminded me, which is why I paid him back. He's got a nephew now who wants to become a chef, blah, blah, blah. So he was like, actually, I paid for it. So I paid him back with a little bit more. But going back to sort of the dark things, and they're not so dark, it's business. When you understand that it's business, it doesn't become dark. It's not an emotional thing. You did what you could do, and hopefully you did your best. And if it works out, sometimes it's great, sometimes it's not. Mangrove as a business was bad, right? It never made money for the 2 years that we've had it. Also compounded by the fact that we opened in COVID was also a game changer. We're doing things that were unprecedented. There was a lot of anxiety around people gathering in spaces. We took on a lot more than what we should have in a very short space of time. So the rental cost alone was quite heavy. We're paying about 140 or something crazy like that.
140,000
in Braamfontein for 2 years.
Crazy.
The building was bought for 800,000. So in about 8 months, we would have paid or at least bought the space. But of course, that's the business of the landlord, which is a great business. My Mangrove, man, has been a very emotional, journey. 2 years of meeting incredible people. We really built a solid culture and a community. And there were serious outpours and cries for, how do we save this thing? A little too late, of course. But I think what we built can still be used to drive some sort of narrative and to create revenue and value for people, right? So 10,000 followers on a page, I think, is quite significant if you're a business. So I will take that and move it forward. But the business is closed. 36 people are out of jobs, and I've had to absorb some of them into the different spaces that I find myself in. We were behind on rent by about 2 months. The landlord was putting pressure. We were closing deals, though, that were going to secure rental for the next couple of months. Suzuki came on board a month ago. They put a billboard, something I was working on for a year. His partner at the time, the landlord, was a really strong character who really wanted to dig deep into people's businesses to understand before he got into business with them. So he had said no to these guys, and they came on board about a month ago. billboard is about 150 odd K. We were doing a 40-40-20 split. So part of that revenue was going to go towards our rental. Netbank, through their youth activations, were going to be part of the street culture segment of the business, and they were coming in strong. So we were making headway with big brands for, the survival and the sustainability of the business. But I think it all became a lot quite quickly, and for some reason, collapse happens so quickly.
Collapse happens very quickly.
You wake
It's
up
like
one
an
day and
accident.
We're closing. And now there's chaos. People are all over the show. You're trying to move stuff. You're trying to really just save what you can and remove a lot of what wasn't ours as well. We had artists work in the space. We had clothes, we had jewelry, etc. because we ran a little store on the side. So we needed to move some of those things and some assets to try and sell off as well so we could pay some of our suppliers, particularly the small black ones, which I think is an important part of what we're trying to do. The unfortunate thing is that now we started a soup kitchen, Sankara Kitchen, and that's now sort of affected. And we're feeding 200 odd people on a Monday morning, on the Monday evening. So, there are a lot of things that I think were great about Mangrove, and I do wish to see it continue to live in one or other form. But yeah, it's been a great journey, and I'm not sad about it closing. I think it's what needed to happen, and we will see something else come to the rise.
Crazy. My two last questions. The first one is, I know that you've got a very deep love for music and the impact that music has had in your various food ventures. In particular, I know there's a band that you've been on a journey with through the years. So the impact of music with the fusion of food in your life, and then I'll ask my last question.
Music is very significant to me. I'll travel, to festivals across the country, across the continent, just to enjoy that. It always goes with food. It always goes with a drink. I did a social cooking class, mixed masala, and there was always music in the background. We had a DJ come in, and again, we're doing stuff that wasn't done before. In most kitchens, no music is allowed. It needs to be this really sterile environment where people do what they need to do. Very stiff, and that's not who I am. So music is a part of it's like alcohol. It gives people a bit of sense of relaxation. This is not that serious, so we can really let loose. The Muffins started their band in our dormitory. Part of that Freedom's Kitchen, Shisa Nyama Mobile history, is riddled with the Muffins. They slept on our floors and they invited us. We went to most of their gigs. We had them perform at a Shisa Nyama in town, which was really amazing. And they performed at Mangrove, so it all came full circle after like 10 years, which is amazing, because you're like, what we did isn't a small thing. The Muffins aren't a small thing. What we do is not small by any means. If people are emotional like this about the business closing, it means it meant something to some people. When we saw some of the messages, that people sent, it really touched them. It was a place they called home. And music at Mangrove was a big part of who we were. We had music in different forms. We had bands every week. We had live sets. We had karaoke. The general music that played in the restaurant as a background was something people looked forward to. And that's always been a big part of how I wanted to enjoy food, is to have some music behind it. And it continues to be something that I do, that I want to continue to do, because it opens up so many other worlds, And I think in general, you shouldn't be eating food in silence. I think it makes it a little bit more tougher, and you're thinking about too many other things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Jeez, that's beautiful. My last question is the link between, you're saying your upbringing and the impact being raised by your mom, the behavioral therapy and dealing with children with some type of deficiency. And now you are teaching children how to cook, which I know Jamie Oliver is also quite passionate about. That full circle of your childhood, and now you are giving back to children, teaching them how to cook. What's that journey about, number one? And then what can we look forward to from Freedom's Kitchen moving forward?
I think I've always loved to teach. Imparting knowledge is the least we can do. If I can't give you money, which I don't like to do, to whoever's listening, I don't have it. But I also just don't like to give it because you're sort of setting people up for failure by being someone who, I guess, says yes to the wrong thing. I don't think people should be given money. I think
giving people money is almost like the cheapest way to solve problems.
Yeah.
When there's a more sustainable one.
Absolutely. So teaching is a passion of mine, I think, and it just so happens that I enjoy food, and that's the thing I can talk about and teach about. It only makes sense that I share it. I've got kids now. Nia is 3, Nala is 1 year and 8 months, and I'm cooking with them at home. And Nia is 3, and she listens fairly well. She enjoys it. She gets really excited. She'll pull a table and put it at the center of the kitchen and says, "Daddy, I want to cook." She doesn't know what she's doing because she's 3, but you can see that she's learning quite critical skills, right? The fine motor stuff. Literally, this action of whisking or mixing something in a bowl is something other kids can't do. Being able to crack an egg, those things are critical life skills. Outside of it being everyday function, when I grow up and I get out of the house, I need to be able to, survive. And part of survival is food. And, food is one of the key things until you die.
Fact.
You have to eat. So as a parent, I can see the value that my child is deriving from what I'm sharing with them. And from a business perspective, there are schools, private schools that have ridiculous, what do you call these things that kids do after extramurals?
Yeah.
And there's not that much value in them, right? But I think what we want to do is give them a skill they can live with forever. And again, part of the problem with our industry is that kids come out of cooking school, culinary school, and they only started cooking at culinary school, which doesn't give them much in knowing how things work. And the pain of seeing a person who's just graduated who doesn't know how to, make basic things, for me is frustrating. So I thought we need to take it back a little bit, By the time you decide I want to be a chef, you must actually be proficient in the very basics. If you look at MasterChef, kids in America, those kids are really, at a very young age doing amazing stuff.
True.
Stuff that adults can't do. Knowing the difference in temperatures, knowing how to properly save or store food, like that's basics, Washing dishes after you've worked. That stuff is what spoiled kids are not made of, And so being able to teach them that stuff is something parents are like, actually, this is amazing. So Jolly Chefs is exactly that. We are going into schools and we are saying we can provide a service and we can take your kids, turn them into little cooks, and hopefully you pay us for it and you see value in it, And hopefully we can get in at a curriculum level where LO isn't just about, I don't know what they learn in LO.
I don't know what they're learning at LO.
Which is a real problem because we're paying for that stuff. So we might as well take up a year and teach people some actual skills. And artisanal stuff is on the rise, Being an artisanal person with skills, what we're doing here, managing a camera, managing a laptop, that's jobs of this future. And unlike most things, food is not going to go away. It's not going to ever be robotic. I don't see that happening because of the disparities that exist. There's always going to be a need for a person to actually make these products themselves.
Kagiso, thank you so much for joining us. I really would like you to come back. I think you and I need to have a conversation around fatherhood. I'm inspired by the work you were doing during varsity. I'm inspired by the way you're raising your daughters. I'm inspired by the role model you are as a father. and then comes the business and the food and the experiences and the music. So this is an invitation for you to come back again, but I'd like to thank you for today.
Thank you for having me, bro. This
Cheers.
was nice.